Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning into today's broadcast. It is the Monday, June 29th, 2026 episode of the Marco Dure Show, the only show where the facts are facts and our truths thrive. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a great show lined up for you today, as always. By the way, we've got lots of great different topics we have to get into and discuss what's happening in Iran, what is going on inside the United States, and what's going on with the AI boom in this country. We'll get into all that and more today, so I hope you'll stick with me throughout the entire hour of today's program. And, of course, it's the week of our independence from Great Britain. So that's, again, a very, very monumental week. And by the way, tomorrow marks my one-year anniversary of starting this program. You're all very much welcome for all this. I just want to say, though, in a serious tone, I want to thank everybody that's always been listening to the program, been sharing the show. I see my downloads going up every single week. So, again, I appreciate you so much. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank each and every one of you. Without you, I wouldn't be doing this show every single weekday. So let's get into it, shall we? I had an article last week on Friday that I wanted to delve into with you. I didn't have enough time, so I wanted to save it for today. Because we're talking about Independence this week, right? This is the week on Saturday. This is our 4th of July. We declared independence from Great Britain. Very, very a watershed moment in history, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think anybody could deny that. But I was looking at an article from Paul Craig Roberts. And we always say we're about, 10 years, 15 years behind what's taking place in Europe. And if that's any indication about what's going to happen in the United States very soon, we're in some grave trouble. Anybody can go on social media and look at, for instance, what's taking place in Paris or Rome or London or inside Spain or, Sweden, wherever. They've allowed these illegal invaders from the Middle East, from Africa, to come in their country and wreak havoc. That doesn't mean there aren't still great places in these countries, of course. But certainly the demographics are changing. That's just true as in we can't get around that, ladies and gentlemen. But here's what he says. He said, in recent days, I've reported on the low report in Britain of the British anti-white, pro-immigrant invader, I would say illegal invader, by the way, and these governments of the last 30 years covering up rapes of 250,000 ethnic British girls by black immigrant invaders. Now, Paul Craig Roberts doesn't mince words. This is what he's saying, and this is what the facts support. I'm not saying everybody that's in this country is a, rapist or criminal or what have you, but there is an epidemic of this type of crime and this type of violence coming from this group of people. Let's be aware of it. Now, parents who complained were arrested, some were in prison for this so-called white racist hate crime against black people. Again, there are more ethnic British people in prison now for hate crimes against these illegal immigrant invaders than there are immigrant invaders in prison for gang raping British children. Let that sink in. If you think the government's coming to save you, folks, you got another thing coming to you. This is a problem. This is a problem in Europe, and again, in some cases, a problem inside the United States. Look at that Austin Metcalf case. Well, that wasn't obviously an immigrant invader, but it's black on white crime in which they try to sweep under the rug and tell you it's not existent. Yet we have people now mocking Austin Metcalf when he was stabbed in the chest by Carmelo Anthony for sitting under a tent in which he was told to leave. Now you have people making these dances about it, people even trying to deflect and actually defend Carmelo Anthony for stabbing an unarmed, innocent white man. Again, he's a teenager. He's 17 years old at the time. But we see this bifurcation now, of course, in the culture. In many cases, they try to put black against white. That doesn't mean in the United States this is always a thing. But when you have people showing up to a courthouse saying that the only good cracker is a dead cracker, a black man is saying this, and yet nothing is done, when we know when the exact opposite were to take place, there would be, obviously, hell to pay. It'd be plastered all over the news media how racist white people are in this country. We know this would be true, folks. Again, I don't mince words. I tell you exactly what I think. And this is no different than what's taking place in Britain right now. So if this is any prognostication of what's coming to the United States, folks, if we don't secure our southern border, our northern border, obviously our coastlines in this country, we're in for a little bit of trouble. And by that, I mean we're in a lot of trouble. But anyways, let's continue on. He says, but immigrant invader gang rapes are not limited to Britain. Again, I agree with him. He said the rapes are a way of these invaders to demonstrate their dominance over the white populations. As the white populations have accepted their disgrace and humiliation, the immigrant invaders have no fear of them now and now will execute white people in public. Again, look at that one young man. Again, I forget I believe it was Noark was his name. He was stabbed. And these two, I believe they were Pakistani brothers, decided to call the police and say that they were assaulted by this white man. They were victims of racism. That's what they cooked up. See, they knew exactly what words to use. They were, the victims of a racist attack. He tried to take off the turban or whatever they tried to sell to the police. Police show up. This young man is bleeding to death. He's saying he's been stabbed. The cops really ignore his pleas as he's dying there. And they handcuffed the guy. Because he may have used a word that was so racist. Yeah, there you go. And this is how things run. So I guess, racism is crime-worthy. You should be thrown in jail for your racism, in other words. This is what, again, passes for law in the UK now. Totally ignoring their own population in favor of the ethnic minorities. So here we go. Let's jump into it more. And it says here that Hanny Herland, who runs the only reliable news service in Europe, again reports on the rampant rape of Scandinavian women by the black immigrant invaders. Here's what she said. And again, it gets worse. In Norway, one of the few reports that publish the ethnicities of criminals showed that 100% of assault rapes were done by non-Western immigrants. These immigrants come from Asia, they come from Africa, South and Central America. And by the way, most people from South and Central America generally are of European, Spanish, Portuguese descent, just so we're all clear on this. They're not a different race than we are. They do come from south of the border. Now, there are some mestizo, mixed race people, of course, and other ethnicities. Anybody can go to these countries, too. So when anyone says, I'm Latino, I'm a different race, I'm like, no, you're not. Where are your parents from? Oh, they're from Spain. Okay, so you're white. Just admit it. It's okay. Anyways, I digress. But here we go. We have Central America, Turkey, which we're now supposed to call Turkey, have much higher crime rates than the general population, with the worst being from Africa. Again, these are the facts. And in Sweden, a recent study showed that 96% of all the rapes are now committed by immigrants. 96%. Now, in both cases, almost exclusively native white women were the ones being raped. In Denmark, again, look no further. Non-Western immigrants are now over 7 times more likely to commit rape than native Danes. But of course, very few of these rapists are convicted or ever charged. They are let go. This is the problem when you don't hold people accountable. So they think, hey, anything's a go. I can come in and do whatever the hell I want. I can rape a woman. I can rob a woman. I can stab a woman. I can spit on a woman. I can shout a woman's face. I can punch her in the face. Doesn't matter. Nothing's going to happen to me. So when there's no accountability, folks, and by the way, I've seen this in the public school system, when you don't hold a child accountable and they know they can do whatever the hell they want and they can get away with it, and there's nothing to stop them if there's no privileges revoked of the student or there's no disciplinary or you're not holding the student accountable, or you're not allowed to in some cases. I can give you many stories of that, by the way. You're in trouble. That student is going to continue on to disrupt your class. They'll disrupt others. They'll get others to act that way, and they'll see exactly, hey, I can do whatever the hell I want to. What's the point? And by the way, they're just going to pass me along anyway, so it doesn't matter. It's even worse when you have kids like that whose parents don't even care as well. Then things get even worse. But this is the same situation, obviously. Not to the degree of the law, of course, but it's the same idea. It's the same concept. If there's no accountability, there's no discipline, if there's no comeuppance for your actions, you are going to continue to act the same unless you see that you're being a complete jackass. That's the way anything works. I heard that from Jack Grisham, lead singer of the band TSOL, and he's also a spoken word artist. And he said once in an interview, he said, unless you see yourself as he used a different word, of course, I'm not going to use the expletive, but he said, unless you see yourself as a jackass, you're never going to change your behavior. And he was an alcoholic through his early years in his life. And he said, until you see yourself as that, you actually look at yourself in the mirror and you figure out, you finally, the light goes off, that you are this person, that you have problems, you're never, ever going to change. And he's absolutely right about it. And thank God he's been sober since then. This is the interview he was talking about when he went sober in 1989. But the same thing applies. Unless there's some real soul searching in your life, you're never going to change unless the law is there to stop you from acting in that way. That's my point of what I'm trying to make of all this. And as a result of the lack of discipline and arrest and holding people accountable, Sweden today now has 60 no-go zones, again, ruled by these immigrant invader gangs, where police are not even allowed to go. The city of Malmö has over 50% non-Western immigrants with a high crime rate index, more than Baghdad. Let that sink in. Sweden has the highest number of bombings for a country not at war. So there you go, folks. There you go. Again, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. When you have people that enter a country that do not want to assimilate, that do not care about the native culture, the demographics, or any of the such, certainly not interested in working, you are at a position where you have a society that is on the brink of collapse. And Sweden is no further away from that than any of these other countries inside of Europe right now. Here we go again. According to a recent study, 96% of assault rapes in Sweden are committed by foreign-born immigrants. And ethnic Swedish women are, of course, the women that are being raped. This is happening right in front of our eyes, and what's being done? What is the EU doing about it? The EU has a position on every other thing. What are they doing about it? Are they going to stop this? Are they going to say, hey, we have to close our borders, we have to deport the illegal invaders? How the hell are you going to become a Swede, by the way, if you're from Central Africa? Maybe by nationality, but if you don't assimilate, you're never going to be a part of that country. Certainly, obviously, you can't ethnically do that. Obviously, you can't change your race. So what are they trying to do? What is the EU so brilliantly trying to do? Where's Mark Rutte on this? Where's Ursula von der Leyen on all of this? That they have now allowed their borders to be wide open in Germany, in Sweden, in Finland, in Norway, in the UK, Italy, Spain. I mean, I could go on. And the only countries that have figured this out are Hungary, Poland, and Russia, for God's sakes. And we have yet to figure this out, folks. That's another problem. The United States has yet to figure this problem out. We had roughly 12 to 20 million illegal aliens enter this country in the 4 years in which Biden was president. It was a complete disgrace. Purposely opened up parts of the southern border to allow anybody to come in. They have the wonderful NGOs processing these people, letting them in the country, sending them on planes. I mean, how the hell do they afford a plane ticket, folks? Giving them manila envelopes of where to go, what to say, where to go when they get there. Yeah, that all was taking place. And again, how the hell did they get by TSA? They don't have any identification. They're not even here legally. Yet I have to stand in a line. When I go to the airport, I have to be patted down like a criminal because I won't go through the x-ray system. Yet they let them right through, folks. Let them right through. On your own taxpayer dollar. That's what this country's coming to. Now, that has ceased to exist under President Trump, of course, but that's what was taking place in our country just a few short years ago. Let that sink in yet again. Now, again, I can go over these statistics for you. Continue to go through this. Again, Sweden, we have Norway on here. It's just unbelievable that this report illustrates 250,000 British children, mostly girls, of course, were raped by illegal immigrant invaders from Middle East, Africa, Central, South America. This has got to stop, folks. And if we don't figure this out and we start deporting these people, by the way, we're going to be in lots of trouble just like this. Because these people do not want to assimilate. They do not want to follow the law. They don't care about the existing society. They aren't going to ever contribute to it. They'll be wards of the state, as they are wards of the state in Europe. They will bring their own customs, which, again, you're seeing how they're sharing it with everybody in Europe right now. And I don't say that lightly, but that's the seriousness of the situation. Well, look at this. In Norway, only 1 in 10 produces a conviction. Again, they're talking about the crime right here. Statistics also show that 1 in 5 Norwegian girls under the age of 15 is exposed to sexual violence. Sweden doesn't even publish official crime data linked to ethnicity or immigration status. This is disgusting. Again, this is anti-white Scandinavian governments killing their own populations off. This is disgusting, sickening, revolting, vile. This is the takedown of the West, folks, happening right in front of your eyes. And so when we have our July 4th celebrations of independence this week, we have to ask ourselves a couple of questions, too. Now, Paul Craig Roberts has another article up today about that. I'll let you look at that if you would like to go to his website at paulcraigroberts.org. Again, he tells you exactly, though, what it is. Are we freer today than we were in 1776? I would suggest we are not. Now, we may have more of a cushy lifestyle. I won't deny that, of course. We still do live in the freest nation on earth. However, are we freer than those people in 1776 that fought the revolution, that fought against Great Britain, that gave us our Constitution, our norms, our values, based in Christianity? Are we freer today than we were in 1776? And the answer is we are not. How can we be when we pay an income tax rate to the government without penalty of violating the law? Let that sink in. If you don't cough up your hard-earned income, which you have created for yourself, you get sent to jail. If you don't pay your property tax, you get sent to, well, you lose your home. Imagine that. You're leasing your land, ladies and gentlemen, right in front of your eyes. Again, the Founding Fathers probably couldn't even have dreamt that we would be this stupid to abandon the ideas of classic liberalism, small government, self-autonomy. We govern ourselves. Again, the Founding Fathers wanted everything to be on a small scale, that the most important government should be your local government, and then from there your state government, and then the federal government after that. Yet all we are is hyper-focused on what takes place inside of the Beltway. But we have to be today because that's the way government has changed in that span of time, in the last 250 years. We've gone from, again, small government, limited immigration, self-autonomy, very, very low taxation, to having what? 50, 60% of the highest earners in this country to be taxed by the government, state and local and federal. How the hell does that shout freedom when you don't even own your own wealth? Taxes here, taxes there. You even want a breathing tax next. They tax your automobile. You register it all the time now. And they have 7 ways from Sunday just to find ways to extract money from you. On top of the worst of it all, inflation. When we handed over our currency to an independent organization, that'd be the Federal Reserve. Yet here you are, losing your own purchasing power every single year, and you're supposed to go, well, as long as it's only 2%. 2%'s okay, it's okay, it's fine. And the American dream gets harder and harder to achieve. It's not impossible. Don't misunderstand me here when I say this to you. I say this from a place of caring about my nation, caring about our founding, caring about the men who risked their lives. Many of them did lose their lives to give us the government, the system, the way in which we perform capitalism in a free market society. We have to remember, folks, we need 1776. We have to remember those ideas. And again, I was reading something not too long ago, and it said we're so far removed from the idea that the founders gave us back in 1776. Of course, the Constitution that would follow from the Declaration, of course, the Bill of Rights. We're so far removed from that even when Lincoln was president, we were so far removed from the idea. Nobody really could grasp the sacrifice and the reason why they gave us what they gave us. This is part of the problem. Because we're not taught this in schools anymore. Certainly not truly what they sacrificed and went through or why they did that. You have people today telling us we're not a Christian nation. Really? We're not a Christian nation? Our values are not based in Christianity? Really? Oh, they'll give you the runaround. Oh, the Judeo-Christian values. Okay, yeah. Well, that's, again, a misnomer, first and foremost. But we are a nation based in Christian values. Are we, though? I was just looking over the weekend. There was a naked bike rally. These are grown men. These are grown perverts riding bikes naked in downtown Los Angeles. I can't even believe this. We live in a society like this today. And they do this in Seattle. They do this in San Francisco, of course. I'm sure they do it in New York City, although I haven't seen that. But this is the debauchery that has become to be accepted in this country. I mean, this would never fly in 1776. That wouldn't even be a thought. In fact, probably for most of America's history, none of this would be thought of as being appropriate, of course, because it's not appropriate. But we have to see where we are today, and how do we get back to that founding? How do we get back to those ideas? That, yes, I govern myself. I don't need the government to tell me what to do because I'm rooted in, again, Christian values. I can govern myself. And that's why John Adams always said, the Constitution is for a moral and just people. Nothing else is wholly adequate. Now, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that's exactly what he said. I know how to govern myself. I can control my own life. I control my own lifestyle. But when we cannot do that, that's when things are obviously going astray. And that's how we have things like these immigration policies in America. And of course, we see this reflecting in Europe right now. But if we don't remember our founding, if we don't understand why our country is as it is, because we don't study history anymore, then we are doomed to lose everything, folks. That's why I say this to you. Because again, 4th of July is this Saturday. I know many people enjoy the fireworks, they enjoy the barbecues, the beers, and what have you, the beach days and the boating. A lot of bees, by the way. But we have to understand, what did they actually give us? Why does it matter? Why should we give a damn? And we should give a damn. But we have to also preserve those values. And if we don't do that, we are destined to lose everything. And now more than ever. But when we look at the State of the Union today, again, the high debt, again, the way certain people act, of course, in society, the crime rates, the way that the demographics have changed, the way we have lost parts of our economy, and the way we've lost parts of our GDP, our status in the world, that we have to be the babysitter and we have to be the forefront of every single war. This isn't conservative values. This isn't conservatism. I don't even know what it is, to be honest with you. I got to be honest with you. I don't even know what it is. It's certainly not what the founders envisioned for us to have. To be giving away our own taxpayer dollars, which were taxed so heavily. Did you know that, again, we can go back and look at tax rates. Even in times like, for instance, under the Roman Empire, they weren't even taxed as much. I mean, it's mind-boggling when you really look at the tax rates and you see how much we are taxed versus other civilizations, other governments, all throughout the civilization of mankind. I mean, again, even under the feudal system, the taxation was not to where it was now as it is in America today. So we have to ask ourselves the question, what the hell are we doing? And why are they taxing us so much when they can just print money out of thin air, which they do all the time? Something for you to consider this week when we celebrate our founding. Again, I want America to flourish. I want it to be free. Free for everybody that is supposed to be here. We don't need government down our backs, always looking over us. We have a police state in many cases today. Spying on us with our phones, spying on us on our, computers, spying on us on our tablets. Cameras all in public today. It's a police state in some cases. We didn't sign up for this, did we? And again, I always think back, what would the founding fathers say about this? Now, I could never know for sure, but I would have to say they wouldn't want, tech companies to be providing ways in order to spy on us illegally, or the government to sign off on things like Section 702 of the FISA Warrants Act, where they can spy on myself and 6 other people of whom I'm in contact with after I contact someone abroad. I mean, this is the part of American history that we've got to get reversed. We've got to get away from this. We've got to say no more. We don't want the government to be spying on us 24/7. It's just not going to be that way. So unless we understand our founding, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll probably do some shows on the founding later in the week, of course, to commemorate our 250 years of us being a nation. And a wonderful nation we are, but we have to do better. We always have to want more, especially from our elected representatives, to actually represent us, not to, again, get rich off their own positions or be bought and paid for by foreign lobbies. I just thought I'd say it to you as well. But I do want to move on to another more positive development, again, relating to the 4th of July this weekend, Independence Day, America's 250th anniversary. Again, we're in a very, very pivotal moment in our country right now. And this is something positive. This comes from Fox News. I saw this last week, but I wanted to go over it, but I didn't have time. So I'm going to go over it with you right now. And this was Catherine Adams Limbaugh. This is Rush Limbaugh's widow. And she was discussing on Sean Hannity's show on Fox the radio icon's enduring impact and announced the official relaunch of a project meant to give young Americans access to patriotic history. Now, again, I can't think of anything better than this. But this is how we win. This is how we turn things around. I was listening to a show a while back, and the host said his father had asked, I think he asked his father, why did the Roman Empire fall? This is when he was a small child. And his father said, because the Romans stopped producing little Romans. What does that mean? When you don't produce people that carry on the legacy or the traditions or the culture or the values or the way of life of that existing society, you will lose that, folks. And that's what they try to do here in America, certainly through the public education system, the higher education system. That's not even up for debate. But when we don't understand our founding, as many people don't, and again, it's not always through lack of trying, but they're just fed such nonsense. Or they're just simply not taught the way they need to be, the way they need to act in society to be civil. Again, we see this after the Knicks game in New York City. People destroying public property, attacking each other. I mean, what is this nonsense? It's mind-boggling. They're in the streets for a Knicks game, but they won't be in the streets for a tax race. Oh, none of that. No, they won't even know about that. Probably most of them probably don't even realize they vote for this crap. But this is the reality of what we're talking about. If you don't understand why you have the government you have, or the values, or why it was created for you, or that you have certain unalienable rights, we have a problem in this country. But what she said was really remarkable, and again, I'm so happy to see all this. She said, I know that if he were here right now, again referring to Rush, he'd be saying it's never time to panic. Now, again, I find that to be very nice, of course. I always think it's time to panic, though. I think we have to, restart exactly what we're doing, right now. We should have been doing this decades ago. It's very difficult to reverse bad policies. Now, she said Rush loved this country with all of his heart. He loved our founding. And that's really what he wanted young people to know about. Why our founding is so incredibly miraculous. Again, absolutely 100% correct. And she went on to talk about how he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And I remember when I was watching that, when he received that, again, it was a very nice moment, certainly, absolutely, that President Trump did. Because I think he realized Rush's contribution to where we are today. Certainly the Republican Party, I think he made great contributions. I don't think that's even up for debate. I have to tell you that. I really don't believe that. But, Rush saw a problem throughout the country where accurate patriotic history was not being taught. This is what she was saying. So he set out on a mission to write these children's books so that young people could really experience our history. Again, brilliant idea. Brilliant when we think about these things. And by the way, you could do this with anything, not just our history. I mean, you could make a child's cookbook, for God's sakes. The proper way to eat, what to avoid. This is all, again, once you train a child how to go, again, this is what the Bible tells us. Once you train a child how they should be, they will follow. Now, you have to instill those values in them. And yes, some kids can go astray. Nobody's perfect. But if you teach your children how to be, that's the way they will probably likely go. And that's why the Bible tells us to do such a thing. This is why we have to, again, instill values at a young age. Be the role models. Be the example. Be the exemplar of how you should act. And when we don't have that parental structure anymore or that discipline from the parents, I'm not talking about beating your kids, but what I'm talking about is discipline. Instilling the values that, yes, education is important. Yes, the founding is important. Yes, it's important that you have skills and you treat people with respect. All these things, if we were doing this, would really solve a lot of the problems in this country. And by the way, once you instill those values get carried on to the next generation and the next generation. You have to know who you are, folks. You have to. Otherwise, we lose everything. And so I was really taken aback by this great interview and, of course, this great article. But this is how we win. This is how we save the next generation. And again, I think my generation, the millennials, and I think the Gen Zers, and probably I don't even know what Gen Alpha is the one after that. People are going to be starving for the truth, starving for positive change, not change, actually, Democratic Socialists of America are pushing on us, but change to get us back to our founding roots in this country. Make it work for everybody. That's the way it's supposed to be. So I wanted to share that with you that, again, this right here, this is how we win. This is why they're, again, relaunching these books, again, in honor of the 250th birthday of America. And this is how we need to move forward. We need to start raising young Americans. And again, we all as adults too, myself included, we all have to take that initiative to follow in those footsteps as well. Now, of course, you listen to my show, so you get a lot of this information already. But again, that's why you share the show. That's why you follow the show. But that's why we have to do our duty, again, to either have children and, again, to influence those children to follow those values as well. Again, there's a lot the children are up against today. We got the entertainment. God knows we can't even call it entertainment anymore. But the rhetoric that comes out of universities and colleges and the public school settings now. And again, they're up against a lot because the left runs a lot of these institutions. This is a great way to combat that. This is a great way to do it. Again, you should also be a part of a good church as well. Certainly that doesn't promote things like, the LGBTQ, XYZ, WTUV group, plus minus, whatever the hell they call themselves now. Staying with Christ values. That's what we should be focusing on. And when you understand those values, you understand the founding a little bit better, I would have to say, folks. But we all have a responsibility to ourselves, again, to love thy neighbor. And by the way, when I say neighbor, that doesn't mean you love people that are assaulting you or attacking you or shouting down to you. But what I am saying when you say your neighbor is your countryman, right? That's what the founding is all about. That's what we created this country for. Well, when I say we, of course, our founders did. That's what it's all about, folks, and that's why we need to understand this week. More than ever, we have to have, again, a revival of the founding, of a revival of 1776. And by the way, too, I want to mention this to you as we move on. Very, very important. This is from Ron DeSantis in Florida. Again, I think he's probably the best governor in the country right now, if I had to make a guess. Certainly he aligns with my values more than probably any other government. Does a couple of things I don't agree with. Don't think anybody's perfect. None of us are perfect. But again, reflecting Very important values given to us by our founding. And I think he's on the right track for this. But here he is. This comes from the Tampa Free Press. It says here that the legislative package is designed, this is again coming from Florida, to restrict local tax increases and inject transparency into municipal finance, arriving just months ahead of a major property tax amendment heading to voters this fall. So what he's trying to do in Florida is to change up how property taxes are handled and how to remove them for certain residents. Again, this is something that is monumental that Ron DeSantis is doing, if he is able to even pull this off. He's getting a lot of pushback from this because, again, budgets will change. Obviously, property taxes take in lots of income for the state and local governments. But this, if he's able to pull this off, you're talking about freedom like we have not seen since the founding. You got to be honest with you. This is something that, again, is going to draw a lot of people to Florida. But he's done some great things. Even if this doesn't even pass, he's done some great things, certainly with the budget in the state of Florida right now. And by the way, Florida has now reduced its budget for the 4th straight year. They've demonstrated fiscal, conservative responsibility and respect for taxpayers. But now he's trying to step it up a notch to protect taxpayers and from taxing at the local level. So you're not just tax. I mean, this is, again, brilliant what he's doing. Again, it comes back to self-autonomy. Now he's talking about how, again, the local governments have continued to grow their budgets by resorting to scare tactics like threatening cuts to essential services. But what he's putting in these bills are ways to ensure that, yes, you have police safety, fire safety, obviously road safety, and things of that such. That's what taxation is for, by the way. That's what all this is for. And again, I think when we highlight and we look at the transparency of how is my local government spending this money which I'm taxed on, and sales tax and what have you, this is holding local officials more accountable, and that's exactly what we need. So I think he's on the right track here, and again, that's why I'm excited to see how this would pass in Florida. Alongside the tax caps, he also has House Bill 1329, known as the Local Government Financial Transparency and Accountability Act. And what this is going to do, it's going to force local governments to move their financial data into the open. So the counties and the local municipalities would now then be required to publish comprehensive, easily accessible financial profiles online. This is big, because now you see exactly where your money's going. And this would then be mandated to disclose and include the detailed budget summaries, the revenue and expenditure logs, the department spending breakdowns, staffing information. Everything would be included on this. And again, you see the exact service levels or the fund balances. This is crucial. This is very crucial. Because then you can figure out what happens if money gets lost or stolen. This is a great idea. And by the way, one of the most notable administration shifts is in this HB 1329. And what he also has in this, it's mandatory that 10% of the budget reduction exercise is involved in this as well. So before any final budgets can be adopted, the local officials must explicitly identify strategies to trim 10% of their proposed spending. Again, these cuts can come from non-essential areas. So explicitly, again, like I said before, law enforcement, fire protection, any other legally required government services are not going to be touched. So again, this is really taking it back to the roots. And again, if it does get passed, that again, there will be amendments to the property taxes in the state of Florida. I think it's going to be something like we have not seen in quite some time in this country. So, again, good on Ron DeSantis. By the way, he's working with no state income tax, and he's cutting the budget 4 years in a row now. And New York has a population roughly the same size as Florida, and they can't seem to do a damn thing right. Republican government, Democratic government. You decide, folks. Which one sounds better to you? All right, since we're talking about domestic issues and court cases, let's move on to, again, something else very, very pressing. This comes from the Supreme Court, though, on Monday. This comes from the Associated Press, ruling that the states can now count ballots after they arrive after Election Day. Oh. So what was it? A 5-4 decision, not a shock, that rejected a Republican-led attack on laws in more than half of these states and the District of Columbia, which I call the District of Criminals, that permit mailed ballots to arrive and be counted some number of days after the election, provided that they are postmarked by Election Day. Isn't that remarkable? You know, you're so dumb you put your ballot in on Election Day? Yeah, right. This just opens up everything for fraud. And by the way, we should have everything counted by Election Day. So again, I'm totally opposed to this ruling. But of course, we had Chief Justice John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett going along with the 3 liberal justices on this case. And that's why we're in the situation we're in. But, I'm looking at this map, and again, allowing states to bring in ballots and count them after Election Day. How is it that, again, let's look back at Florida for just a moment. How is it that Florida, the second or third largest population in terms of states in the country, can get all their ballots counted on Election Day, no problems, no questions asked? Yet New York, California, several other these blue states, they have these systems in place, so they're still counting ballots for weeks on end afterwards. Tell me how that doesn't show that things should be ripe for fraud or allow the ability for fraud. Ask yourself those questions, folks, if you would like. But Congress could change the law, is what they're saying here, if varied deadlines for ballot receipts similarly call for a national solution. The American people must choose it through their elected representatives. That's what Barrett wrote, the genius that she is. Here's the problem I have. Again, we know that these machines can be tampered with. We know ballots can just simply show up. In a state like California, my previous home state, you could have people go and do what's called ballot harvesting. So in other words, someone could say, you're in a nursing home. I'm going to come and pick up your ballot. Would you give me your ballot? I'll turn it in for you. This passed in California, which is, again, completely stupid. But you could say, I'll fill it out for you. How would you like to vote? I just need you to sign your signature and I'll do it all for you. Okay, great. Again, how do I know this person filled out the ballot accordingly? I don't know, it wasn't tampered. How do you know someone said, I'm really not going to vote? Well, can I take your ballot for you? We have a way to, dispose of him, so there's no fraud, ma'am, sir. Oh, sure, take it, sure. How do I know that person's not filling it out? They just run it through. This is part of the problem. And again, this mail-in ballot system where everybody gets a ballot, can mail it in. Again, this came through with the COVID nonsense in 2020. And the idea we've stayed with this now to continue to use this system, which again we know is completely faulty, again just shows you that everything can be wrought with fraud. And so this is why Trump is really pressing to push the Save America Act. Now, it's already made it through the House of Representatives. It hasn't made it through the Senate yet. But the cheating that goes on. And by the way, you look no further than the LA mayoral race. I've talked with you in great detail about this. Again, how they stole that from Spencer Pratt. Again, you don't get a dump after the election of 25,000 ballots and the second leading candidate, who's a couple percentage points behind the incumbent mayor. Everyone gets votes. Everyone that's in the race gets votes, but the second place finisher thus far. Statistically, doesn't even make any sense. Any statistician will tell you that. Doesn't make any bit of any sense. But this is how they can rig things. This is how they can throw things. We found all these ballots. So we got to run them through now. Oh, look at this. Oh, wow. Yes. The third place candidate who was so far behind you, Mr. Pratt, has now jumped and surged in the mail-in ballots. So ironically. Again, it doesn't make any sense, but this is how they work things out, and this is how they do things. So, what's my answer to this? How do we solve this? And by the way, there are red states that do this too. Again, I'm completely opposed to this. We have an election day in this country, not an election week. And again, since we've had these electronic machines, it's taking longer. We can look at examples of other nations that have populations far greater exceeding California's. They get everything done in a day. So there's really no excuse for this at all. There's really no excuse why everything shouldn't be in by election day. Right? I mean, doesn't that make sense? Again, if you get a ballot months ahead of time, shouldn't it be upon you to make sure that's in by Election Day. I mean, I'm just asking the obvious question here. Shouldn't everything be in by Election Day to be counted? That's the question. And again, before we had these electronic machines, everything was generally counted on that day. You knew exactly who was going to be winning that race. It was all done by hand. Somehow we can't figure out how to do this by voting machine, though. Here's what Trump needs to do. I don't know why he hasn't done it yet, but this is what he needs to do. If he wants to get this shot down, what he needs to do, he needs to go in, audit any state that doesn't have voter ID laws, like California, New York, go through the machines, forensically audit them, show there's proof of fraud. Again, look at the mayoral race in Los Angeles. Just do that one particular race. And say, look at this, Supreme Court. Look at this. We have this influx of ballots coming in after the fact, after Election Day. And they've just miraculously found in some cases. And look at the cheating that has gone on. This is how you do these things. This is why we need to pass the SAVE Act. Again, give people reason, cause for concern to rule in favor that, yes, we have an election day. We don't have an election week or month or whatever the hell they want to make now. Because, again, it gives you more time to commit this type of fraud. Show without reason of doubt here, and then you have a case. And it'll probably get turned around. That's the way it should be. But Trump has got to do this. You know, it's one thing to say there's fraud or see the fraud in broad daylight, as many of us have seen all throughout the years. But it's another thing to actually take it on head first. There's nothing stopping him from doing a forensic audit. So why the hell isn't he? Do a forensic audit on these machines. Figure out if there was any cheating in these states that have these types of systems. Okay, you can look at Mississippi too, for all I could give less than that. But look at California first, in a race of which we know there was obviously some tampering going on with the election. I don't think anybody could deny that at this point. So do that. Then you go back to the Supreme Court and say, listen, look what we found with these electronic voting machines. You're allowing ballots to come in from, God knows where. And there's no real system because there's nothing in check to make sure that person is the person voting. Or that person that filled out the ballot is the person that has filled out the ballot. Then you're letting votes come in after the fact, of which we know how some of these people are polling. Again, it doesn't make any sense to any reasonable person, I would have to say. But how many reasonable people do we have left in the United States, folks? That's the next big question. So there's that. And by the way, Shannon Bream was on Fox News and talking about this case today. I'm going to play just a short clip of her speaking about this to you. But again, she retorts exactly what I just said to you. Take a listen.
All right, guys, this is not a win for Republicans who were challenging this. Mississippi has a state law which allows ballots to be counted, mail-in ballots after Election Day. If they come in, they're postmarked and meet the state requirements, but is a 5-4 loss for Republicans. And an interesting cobbling together of who wrote on this. Justice Barrett wrote the opinion. Justice Roberts joined her along with Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson. So those five stuck together on this. The dissent comes from Justice Alito. Thomas Gorsuch and Kavanaugh join him. And essentially what the majority said is that these federal statutes setting Election Day don't prescribe or they don't stand in conflict with states that want to say, okay, we have a procedure to count ballots after Election Day. Justice Alito, writing for the dissent, says today's decision is inconsistent with the terms of the Election Day statutes, contemporary election law principles, 2 centuries of historical practice, and the case law on the question presented. So if you're a state out there that counts ballots after Election Day based on your state law, that state law will stand.
So there you go. You have Conehead Barrett, who, by the way, when she was being nominated, I said what a disaster this woman would be. And everyone said, no, Jeray, she's going to be great. She's going to be just like Scalia. And I said, have you seen how this woman has ruled in some cases? She was a circuit court judge, if I'm not mistaken. This is a woman who voted for, what's his name? Pete Buttigieg. Oh, yeah, there you go, for mayor of South Bend. This is a woman who, when the Illinois Republicans brought up, what's his name? J.B. Pritzker, right? The Jumbo Blimp himself, Jumbo Blimp Pritzker, about his COVID laws, or COVID lockdown rules. She ruled in favor of J.B. Pritzker. It was the Illinois Republicans against J.B. Pritzker, and she ruled in favor of J.B. Pritzker. Can you believe that? This woman's supposed to be a conservative? Really? There were some other rulings, too, that she was in that was just, again, made my head shake at the time. And I was trying to contact people, certainly people, influencers. I even emailed some radio stations. I said, we need to talk about this. This should be known that this is who this woman is. She's not who they're claiming she is. And where did Trump get her from? Through Mitch McConnell, through the Federalist Society. Not a shock there. I called this in 2020, and sadly, again, folks, I was right. Now, again, I didn't have my show at the time, but, I know that I was there doing that. And sadly enough, she tries to be a complete and utter disappointment. Anyways, that being said, this is where we are now. Again, forensic audit these machines, show that there's fraud happening with the mail-in ballots, and get this stopped. That's the only way we solve this. That's the only way this happens, folks. All right, let's move on. We don't have much time. We're about 10 minutes in the broadcast today. Let's jump our focus over to what's taking place in the Middle East. Of course, folks, we have, again, the breaking of the Memorandum of Understanding. I guess Trump didn't read it. I mean, that's really the truth of it. I guess Trump just didn't read it. He didn't understand what he was signing off on. There's no other way for his actions over the weekend. But he was stifled by the idea that Iran was going to still control what takes place inside the Strait of Hormuz. And again, the U.S. violated the ceasefire after firing on Iran over the weekend. So what took place? Here, let's break it down for you. Well, we talked about the MV Ever Lovely being attacked by a drone. This was a Singapore-flagged vessel that ignored the IRGC's warnings. And upon this, a drone struck the starboard side of the ship. The ship was still able to move on. There were no casualties. But it was a warning. It was essentially saying, listen, you have to coordinate with us where you go through. This is the example. By the way, the day before, they already gave out the issuance that, yes, you still need to coordinate with us going through the Persian Gulf Strait Authority. Again, you go online, you fill out the form, you fax it in, you coordinate with the IRGC, and you transit through the Strait of Hormuz. Not a big issue. They're not charging tolls yet either. And the reason they're doing this is because they don't want any vessels that are headed to Israel. That's really what this comes down to. But upon the transiting, the vessel was, again, struck by this drone. But then the U.S. does something stupid. Because apparently it didn't read what was in the Memorandum of Understanding. And by the way, I have it right here so I can read it back to you. And what they said was upon the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, they would do that within 30 days of the signing of the memorandum. But it was under Iranian arrangements. So in other words, yes, it's open to anybody that wants to pass through except for these Israeli ships or ships that are bound for Israel. Those ships are not going to be able to cross. Every other ship can go through. But the ship decided not to do that. Now, why the United States, I guess, was using an F-16 to escort the MV Ever Lovely and trying to get them to go through the Omani section of the Strait, or the Omani Pass, if you will, through the Strait of Hormuz. Why they did that, again, I have no idea. Excuse me. But this is why they were in the situation. So again, the U.S. violated the agreement, not the Iranians. The Iranians had that in the Memorandum of Understanding. That yes, you still have to make arrangements with the Iranian government, the IRGC, and you'll be able to transit. Not a problem. They didn't want to do that, though. Now, whether this is political theater, a dramatic showing, smoke and mirrors, again, I have no idea. But there was an exchange. The U.S. hit Iran, Iran hit the United States, again, hitting minor targets, which makes me think, again, it's all political drama. Then on Saturday, 2 more vessels then tried to cross over the strait without permission again, and Iran hit them a little bit harder. Made them turn around. So they didn't end up transiting the strait. The U.S. again responds by hitting targets a little bit harder. Again, we can call it political drama. No real big issues at that time. However, the Iranians come in now. Comes in a little bit harder. They decided to strike a U.S. base in Kuwait called the Al-Salam, and they also struck a base in Bahrain. Again, no major casualties. I don't believe there were any planes that were destroyed. But the U.S. then, after that strike, decided not to retaliate. We have Qatar stepping in now to try to mitigate what was happening, and now there is scheduled to have a meeting tomorrow in Qatar. Now we have many ships still in standstill now to avoid things like the EU sanctions, by the way, the wonderful EU sanctions that are just sitting there now. Again, that's not Iran's doing. It's because of what the EU does. So, which is so stupid, by the way. They have ships, for instance, that don't want to transit through the Iranian side of the Strait of Hormuz because they feel it'll violate EU sanctions. So in other words, they will be sanctioned if they cross through that part. And again, that has to do with the EU, not the Iranians. So again, I say this to you, how ridiculous this all is, that again, I guess Trump didn't read his agreement properly, because yes, the Iranians can still control who goes in and out. But yes, for the 60 days, you will have no tolls. Now, afterwards, you will have tolls. That's going to be something that happens. I guess Mike Waltz, our UN ambassador, who I guess is a dunce. Either, again, he didn't read it either. It doesn't understand international law. But anyways, here he is talking with Shannon Bream just yesterday. Take a listen.
Well, Shannon, if the Iranian regime thinks for a second that President Trump is going to stand by, while Iran continues to attack international shipping without a response, or our bases without a response, they're sadly mistaken. And they saw that loud and clear over the last few nights, where we'll continue to militarily, if needed, take down their infrastructure that they're trying to use to illegally control an international waterway. And Shannon, just one more point on that. That's not just the United States. That's the entire international community. A UN record, 143 nations have agreed with us that this is in violation of international law. Even the Chinese government has said you cannot be taking tolls or fees. Iran was apparently relying on Oman across the waterway to help it set up this new infrastructure. And now Oman just yesterday has rejected the idea of tolls or fees. So they're completely isolated here. President Trump's not going to stand for it. And meanwhile, we continue to move ships out by the dozens every day. And world oil prices are not just stable, they're dropping.
So the only thing he really said that was true was that the oil prices have dropped. They're, last I checked before the show began today, we're in the $70 range. I think West Texas Intermediate was around just over 70, and Brent crude was around $73 per barrel. Up just slightly today, but down significantly. So he's not wrong about that. But however, he's wrong about every other thing he just said. First of all, again, the international community agreeing with you. Well, again, what does that mean? International law says you control everything from your shoreline, 12 nautical miles, which again in regular miles would equate to about 13.8 miles. Okay, the Strait of Hormuz is about 21 miles in length. The other side of the strait is controlled by the Omanis. And by the way, the Omanis have not come out and said they are opposed to it as well. They're on board with it. So again, I don't know where he got that from, Mike Waltz, but he's wrong. Just wanted to say that to you. So again, controlling what? But yes, they can. Do the Egyptians control the Suez Canal? Do the Panamanians control the Panama Canal? I think they do. And the Iranians now can control the Strait of Hormuz because, again, it's in their territorial waters, not international waters. Now, it is an international waterway, but again, it's through their waters. You are crossing through their waters. That's the way it works. So, Mike Waltz, again, I don't understand why you said that. That's a bit ridiculous. Again, I think this memorandum of understanding is on its last leg here. I don't know what will take place tomorrow. We know that there's a standstill right now between the U.S. and Iran. They will meet tomorrow. They were supposed to meet in Switzerland, but now they're going to meet again about what's taking place in the Strait of Hormuz. But Trump already signed off on that, folks. So I don't know what more he's going to get about what he needs to understand. I guess they're sending Curly and Moe, Kushner and Witkoff tomorrow, too, which, again, just shows you how unserious we are. Oh, by the way, Hezbollah on Saturday rejected another agreement by the Lebanese government trying to seek an end to the conflict with Israel. They said they will not stand down. So, again, expect everything to go haywire very, very soon with Israel and Lebanon. That'll do it for today's show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again for being here as always. I appreciate you so much. Make sure you're staying prepped with food, water, medicine, anything to be self-sufficient. Enjoy the rest of the day. I'll see you back here tomorrow for more groundbreaking news. Until then, be good, stay busy. God bless.